Education. I've got a feeling and a theory with this, which is that that what education fails to do. For a while, I worked for this FTSE 100 company, and the best way I've come to describe it as an organisation these days is like it's a successful company full of unsuccessful people. And then like 4 or 5 years go by, and they got and they got to get their promotion, they got to get their pay rise, they got to get their slightly smarter suit, they've got to get the slightly bigger house, they've got to get the slightly fancier new car. It's like the predictable scaffolding of life, particularly as a successful person in a successful business. But I fucking hate those guys that are like, I'll do anything for my kids. And it's like, well, would you go part-time and take a 30k pay cut? I didn't mean anything. Like, my life is chaos. It will probably become more chaotic rather than less as time goes by. But I always know I'm going to be a patient, present parent. Like, me and my business partner, we have this kind of phrase, which is like, what's the path of least regret? You look at all of these sort of successes, and it's like, okay, so what are the consistent behaviours that allow those successes to happen? And if you can start to unpick that and start to articulate it, all of a sudden, very honest and authentic values for people and teams can appear. But for me, it all comes down to behaviour. Like, behaviour and questions are the driving force of the things that get us wherever we're going. And she always used to say, Jacob, don't you know that less is more? And he said, I'll never forget what I said to her. I turned around to her and said, yes, but in order to know what less is, you need to experience more first. And this is always a very unpopular opinion, or a very unpopular thing for people to hear, I suppose. But the people that I'm least interested in working with are the people that...
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. Through sharing the stories of our guests, I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors, Nostos, an authentic experience of Greece right here in the heart of Hove. In a world brimming with dining options, finding that one place that captivates your palate and heart isn't always easy. It's about more than food. It's the stories, the ambience, the slice of another world. This is the essence of Nostos, an award-winning Greek restaurant. With traditional recipes passed down through generations, each dish promises a story and a piece of heritage. And Nostos is more than just a restaurant, it's a community contributor. Each dining experience supports initiatives close to their heart, from local charities to cultural events enriching Brighton and Hove's social fabric. They also provide catering services, bringing Greek cuisine to your personal events. For a taste of Greece without leaving town, visit nostos-hove.co.uk. And when you do go, say Sam recommended the feta nests. Oh my God, they are amazing. Okay, welcome to another episode of the podcast. My guest this week is very much a man after my own heart, who lives life wearing a variety of different hats. He is a businessman, a creative entrepreneur, an author, and the curator of TedX Brighton, to name a few of his hats. He helps people experience more creative freedom in their work, and someone I've followed for some time and recently had the pleasure of meeting. I'm delighted to welcome Toby Moore to the podcast.
Whoa.
How are you, sir? How are you?
Yeah, I'm fab. A few car troubles on the way in.
Yeah.
But it all adds to the story, doesn't it?
Mate, of course. Listen, how brilliant it's been to meet you recently. It's
been great.
And have a chat. And like I said, we were sitting in having a coffee, and I was like, I couldn't wait to get you on. And I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be fun.
Let's go.
Let's do it. Mate, as always, we're going to kick off. I believe everyone's story starts somewhere. It's got to have a beginning with every great story. So look, tell me, we do our life in 60 seconds, right? So this is just a snapshot. Tell me something about your childhood that's helped shape who sits in front of me today.
Yeah, I know this question's coming, right? But I really struggle with stuff like this, mostly because I have a terrible memory, like a particularly poor chronological memory. But when I was scratching around, like I think my childhood is much more a series of memories that then create like a theme. Do you know what I mean? So like, you know, play and creativity and invention is a big part of my childhood, but I've struggled to pin it to one memory. But one of the things that my mum always likes to remind me of is that when I was a kid, I had this invention book, and I would carry it around with me wherever I go, and that would be where I'd like come up with ideas for like ways of powering things, or like walking dogs, or like, you know, making food or something like that. And I'd create these inventions, and I'd like in great detail like annotate how these inventions would work, even if it was completely, you know, misfound in physics or whatever. And I was just thinking about some other stuff that kind of stands out, and being much younger than that, and it was around the time that Wallace and Gromit came out, and me and a friend getting the old VHS like video cameras out, and then making plasticine models, and making this plasticine guy play with a yo-yo and stuff like that. And then the third memory that I sort of like dug around and found whilst I was sort of umming and ahhing about how to respond to this famous question now was actually writing, and at school. And we'll talk about it more, I guess, as we go on, because I know that you want to talk about like creativity and education and so on. But and just being sort of like shown and celebrated at a young age at school for writing as well. But then, and I think that got lost along the way. Do you know what I mean? And I think for me, digging back into childhood and re-establishing myself as a creative is only something that's happened quite recently. I think there's a big chunk of my life where that went missing. But the story as a child starts from just play, I think. Play and invention.
It's crazy, isn't it, as well? Because you're right. Where do we lose that as we go? The society gets hold of us a little bit, doesn't it? And feel like we've got to do X, Y, and Z. And I know we spoke about it offline previously. We talked about when do we stop dreaming as kids?
Yeah.
As kids, we dream big, don't we?
Yeah.
I'm going to do this, we're going to do that, and nothing's impossible. Of course, I'm going to get to the moon and build a spaceship.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to your podcast with Bruno, and I was just like, and that was a real like almost had like a sort of like a triggering moment, like in a positive way. Because I was like, like he's dreamed of this thing this whole time, like he's had that, and I had to sort of like challenge myself a bit and be like, what's that for me? And I think there is that element of school, work, also just kind of like relationships as well, like start to train you out of that stuff. There's the Ken Robinson's quote, it's like school trains creativity out of children, not in. And I think that is the fundamental thing. Like life prepares us for this like set of activities that we're about to do, but only like 10% of us need to actually really sort of like carry out those activities.
Yeah, and it is so strange, isn't it? You go, because I still remember sitting there when England went out of the World Cup in 1990. I still remember sitting there crying my eyes out, 11 years old, saying to my dad, "I'm going to win the World Cup." And that was my dream up until I was 16 and didn't make it, and like millions of other young lads. But that was such a vivid, clear dream. I was gonna, without that, I was gonna lift that World Cup.
I wanted to be a spy.
Did you?
I was hell bent on being a spy.
James Bond.
I think that's where the inventions came from. Like, do you know what I mean? It's all like this sort of like Q branch type. That's what I thought. Like, I was going to be this spy that bridged the gap between espionage and Q branch.
You're not really a spy. Is this what's going to come out on the podcast?
Yeah. I've just outed myself. My dad was like well into like James Bond, and when I was a kid, actually, we had this in my bedroom at my dad's house. We had this, like, I think we got it from like a Lego exhibition, and it was this like, what to me at the time felt enormous. It was probably just like an A2 piece of card, but to me it was the biggest thing I'd ever seen, you know. And it was this sort of this picture of Lego Island, and you know, all of the sort of like pirates and aeroplanes and stuff sort of like flying out the edges. And every, you know, at night, my dad would tell me these like bedtime stories, and he would use Lego Island as like the setting for these stories. And then what I learned later on in life is he was just stealing James Bond plots and retelling them through the lens of Lego characters. But I think that's where our shared affinity for espionage came from.
Love that.
And I don't think it shows up at all in my in my adult life. I don't know, but maybe it does, and I haven't seen it yet. Maybe that's my next 10 years of discovery. I don't know.
That's your final calling. Isn't it?
Yeah.
If we see you go off to see a little bit, and where's Toby? Of Spy. Well, I want to. You mentioned your dad there a bit, and obviously, recently read your book "Make It," which was fantastic.
Thank you.
And you talk about your dad's influence as well. I mean, we mentioned in the intro there about the different hats and stuff like that. Just talk to me a little bit about that. I guess more about that childhood, growing up and seeing him and different roles that he played, and the impact I guess that had on you.
Yeah, my dad passed away 2016, and but he was like us, he had loads of hats, and it's kind of ridiculous, really. Like when I was born, my parents lived on a farm. They were farmers in Wales, and then like prior to that, he was like an antiques dealer and he was a ski guide, and then I think before that he used to run like a scuba diving society or something like that, and he used to like go and do shipwreck dives and things, and then after a while, after living on this farm in Wales, my dad wanted to go and become a lawyer, so that we left Wales and came back to Brighton. He went to university in Brighton. My dad grew up in Brighton. He's a Brighton boy. But yeah, and then went and went to university, and then stayed at university until he died. But got his bar exams and then became a barrister, and I think he spent like 6-7 years preparing to be a barrister, and then spent about 6 or 7 weeks being a barrister, and then was like, yeah, this isn't for me, and then went into teaching, and then a little later on into that he got into archaeology, and like for the last like 10-15 years of my dad's life, he would dress like Indiana Jones every day. So he'd have like the leather jacket, he had the hat, he had a Jeep, and on the back of the Jeep had like the sort of like the depiction of the hat and the whip, and he ran this archaeological society, and he'd take people out on digs, and then he ended up specialising in Greek and Minoan archaeology, and I think one of the things he did in the last couple of years before he passed away was that he went and explored the labyrinths on Crete, like where the Minotaurs were and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. He, it's interesting because I look back on some of like the nurturing advice that he would give me, and he had a very sort of low risk approach to sort of like helping me manage and understand my life and navigate that. But then I look at him, and he would just kind of like, he had this mentality of like, well, that looks fun, let's go and do that, and then he would professionalize in it and turn it into a thing for a while, and then just turn to the next thing, and that was his life. And I'm like, and you look at other people's lives where like they just, I don't know, accountants or librarians or whatever for their whole lives, and you think that can't be, if you just feel attracted and magnetized to a skill or an activity or whatever, like just put your head to it.
I love that, because there's something about living a life like that, where you get to your deathbed and you look back and you go, I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like, I'll give it a go, rather than that. That's always been, I guess, my philosophy, and I tripped over and failed and done things that not worked out many times, but you look at, you go, I've gone, I'll give that a go. Didn't work out, but I'll give it a go, and it was good fun. I learnt from that, or I done that. Do you know what I mean? Just, I guess, I know we sort of mentioned on message and stuff like that, but was it him then that gave you the permission? You sort
I
of
think that's the magic word, is permission. Yeah, and
because what was his? I guess what was it that you said he would maybe suggest to you not to go down that path? Was he more like? Was there an influence that he sort of, why don't you get into this or that, or?
Yeah, we worked together for a long time, not together as in like, running a business together, like actually, which is what me and my mum do now. But me and my dad, he was a teacher, and he got me a job in the school. I remember quite a few times, and around that time but sort of about 4 or 5 years into getting that job, and I'd worked myself up into this sort of management position in the IT team for overseeing these schools and stuff, and I was getting to go and travel around a bit, and and I was meeting lots of people, and I was being offered quite interesting opportunities. Whenever I'd sort of cast them under my dad's eyes and be like, oh, someone wants me to go and work here, what do you think? Or someone wants me to go and work there. He'd be like, this is it's a safe job. It's a good job here, Tobes. This is a safe bet. And you move to a smaller company, you never know what's going to happen. And the irony is that schools now closed down and they went into liquidation, all sorts of things. Interesting. I can't remember. I might have mentioned this to you the other day, but my mum gave me some really interesting advice recently, where I was just struggling to make my way through a couple of deals had fallen through at work, and I'm trying to work out, okay, what do I do? And in sort of a moment, whenever I sort of get really pissed off with my work, I go and look at jobs boards and be like, right, I'm sacking it all in, and I'm applying for jobs, which is obviously never going to work,
Yeah.
But I told my mum, and I was like, oh, Mum, what do you think of this job? And she was like, Tobes, if you're struggling for cash at the moment, is applying for jobs really the right thing to do? Which is like the opposite of advice that your mum's supposed to give you, right? It's just kind of like, oh gosh, if you're, you got to go and got to go out to work and earn your crust. It's like, no, come on, Tobes, you make things. Like, get out there and make something. I'm like, okay, yes, Mum. So funny.
That's such a brilliant, because you're right, there's that encouragement to just back to following dreams or following your own path and create, because there's a narrative within society that we do X, Y and Z, and it's still even I'm obviously a little bit older than you, I guess, but there's that generation of just looking back and school, education, good job, house, settle down, family, and that type of structure is still there.
Well, I used to work for a while. I worked for this FTSE 100 company, and the best way I've come to describe it as an organisation these days is it's a successful company full of unsuccessful people. And I just used to watch people get in and out the elevator every day, and you can just see it's the there's this kind of phases of being a person inside these organizations, and you watch someone walk into the lift, it's a man, they're wearing a Marks and Spencer suit, they probably drive an Audi A4, A5, they've probably spent an hour and a half on the train getting here, and they probably live in a 3-bedroom house in some fucking new build development in, I don't know, Herefordshire or something, and they're like robots coming in, coming out, and then there's another phase, and all of a sudden they've got a suit from somewhere else a little bit more fancy, and they've got a slightly bigger car, and they've got a slightly bigger house, so they've put an extension on, or or now they've got a double driveway, and then 4 or 5 years go by, and they got and they got to get their promotion, they've got to get their pay rise, they've got to get their slightly smarter suit, they've got to get the slightly bigger house, they've got to get the slightly fancier new car. It's the predictable scaffolding of life, particularly as a successful person in a successful business, and I think there's an element of becoming a parent as well that really rocks this for me. And forgive me if anyone listening feels like this is you, but I fucking hate those guys that are like, I'll do anything for my kids. And it's like, well, would you go part-time and take a 30k pay cut? I didn't mean anything, And I was like, yeah, but I'd fucking kill a man, and it's just like, well, yeah. I'd maybe try going part-time before you kill the man, and I just hate this narrative of that being a part of a family and being a parent means not showing up, and it means showing up over here and not over here, and I really, that's one of the things that, my life is chaos. It will probably become more chaotic rather than less as time goes by, but I always know I'm going to be a patient, present parent, and I don't think you can regret that. Me and my business partner, we have this kind of phrase which is what's the path of least regret? And whenever we're trying to make decisions, we'll that's one of the first questions we ask ourselves, and it's a very helpful question. And I think particularly when it comes to that family, friendships, work, money, all of those sorts of things, the path of least resistance is often the path of most regret, possibly. Does that make sense?
It really does. And it's such a valuable message for me, listening to that. It's such a valuable message. As a father myself as well, when I look at the kids, and similar, my life is very chaotic. Here, there and everywhere. People often be out and it's like, stop Kelly, and they go, oh, Sam, he's everywhere and he has it, blah, blah, blah. And okay, and I'd like to think I'm still a good father, and I'll do my best to be a good husband as well, and all of those things. But I am still me, and I still want to show the kids that I'm me, and I'm still following my dreams. Because I will tell them every single night before they go to bed, one of my favourite films is The Greatest Showman, and I'll say to them, dream me a million dreams tonight. I say that to them most nights before we go to bed. Dream me a million dreams. And I talk to them about dreams all the time. But how can then, it's fine to say that, and then me go, I'm just getting on the train to go into London to do a job that I absolutely hate. Yeah. And then I'm going to, because I talk about this and I do the podcast. What are you doing today, Daddy? I've got a podcast today, or I'm doing this event today. And of course, there's stresses that come with stuff, and they see that side of me from time to time. But ultimately, I try and do things that I love. And I guess
something I've had to sort of like, just sort of, what it's like with grandparents and coming and look after kids, and like, and most people are just kind of like, don't give them, sort of like sweets or whatever. Like, and me and my mum, like, it's about, one of the things is work, and she'll be like, when mum's coming to look after Emmy for the day or something, and she'll be like, Daddy needs to go to work because he needs to earn the money, and I'm like, Mum, don't tell Emmy that, she's 3, like, she's 4, like I'm like, and so the narrative that I've tried to create with my daughter is like, well, why do we go to work? It's like, well, work is how we choose to help people, and particularly, like, her mum runs a charity, like I do, whatever the fuck it is that I do, and like, but what, I think for a child that's a much more helpful lens to look at work through, and money is this separate thing that that has to be understood in a different way, and her understanding of money at the moment is kind of like, it's how many $bucks, does pasta cost or whatever. Like, she gets her more financial advice from Bluey than me, I think. And but that feels appropriate at 4. Yeah, and just trying to sort of, because work isn't, how much time you spend at work does not dictate how much money you have. Like, any of us that know anything know that. And I don't want my child to grow up thinking that, like, parents need to be absent from family life for a period of time every day in order to. And I am probably wrong about this in many ways, and I'm sure the psychology works against me. But I just don't want Emmy to think that I need to disappear for a period of time in order to make sure that there is things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. But I'm keen. Do you feel like all what you've just suggested about the narrative out there around, people going into the FTSE 100 companies? Do you feel that narrative's changing, or do you think we're still well in that archaic way of thinking from society as a whole?
Well, I think one of the trends is that people have more careers in their lives in general. I think that's quite well evidenced now, and back in our sort of parents' generations, and particularly the generations prior to that, people had a profession and they subscribed to that profession for most of their lives. I think when I was in my sort of early 20s and just getting into a career, the stat was something like most people have 3 or 4 careers in their lives. And I think now, sort of a decade or so on from that point, it's closer to sort of 6. And I don't know how people go about gathering that information, but it seems that sounds pretty legit to me. Like, so I think it's the permission that exists to change gears and re-explore, and I think probably COVID has been a massive catalyst for that as well, because I think that gave a lot of people permission, but also sort of templates and frameworks for changing careers. I think one of my favourite sort of like stories from my friendship group over COVID was my friend used to work for an aviation company, and he worked there for years in a sort of like relatively junior role, and then maybe like a year or two before COVID really started to move up through the ranks and was going around, was getting to travel around the world and train up other teams and all of that sort of thing, and beginning to really establish himself as he was like, this is working for me then, my career's taken off, and then COVID came, and like one of the first first industries was aviation, for the bottom to fall out of it, right? And he really struggled to kind of re-establish himself in a job. But whilst he was traveling for work, for this aviation company, he got into street photography, and he would go around, and he's got these like beautiful portraits that he took in like Singapore and like the sort of like back streets and stuff of these like old guys smoking cigarettes and stuff, and like there's just beautiful like this beautiful photography work. And then my old business partner at the time was working for a photography company, and got him a job just kind of like helping package up cameras and stuff. And then just like, within a year, he's like a product specialist and doing all sorts of interesting stuff with cameras. And then he's like got his side hustle, which is going and doing photography and doing fashion shoots and brand shoots and stuff. And like, I think he probably, earns, a lot less than he was when he was at the aviation company. But like, he's like so fucking happy with his work, like and he's got such everything that he does is related to photography and that creative expression and activity, and it's awesome. And one of the things I'd love to do is to go out and do one of my little projects on the board, so to speak. It's like I want to go and make a coffee table book of all of the people that kind of like had their lives kind of like destroyed but then rebuilt in a really beautiful way because of COVID, and they were able to make that pivot because, and maybe, if COVID had never happened, maybe they would still be kind of like, sort of going down the successful company full of unsuccessful people route. Yeah.
God, it massively, didn't it? So many people were forced to question where they were.
Yeah, but me included.
Yeah, same. Like, I remember looking at the stuff, and you go like, no, business is struggling, I'm doing the right thing. But then you realise actually when so much is taken away, how little you actually need to. But like, I remember sitting there at the time thinking, actually, if we had loads of money, if that was the goal, we'd be in a bigger house with a car and a drive that we couldn't drive anyway. So the fact that we're here together, whatever this looks like, I was with the people I loved, and that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
That's all we need. That's when you realise that's actually all we need, that connection and love, and the rest is a bonus.
Yes. I think post-COVID, like I've fallen in love with my house again, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I got to spend a lot of time there, and then sort of went through this period of exodus and escapism in order to get the fuck out of there. And now I've fallen in love with it again. And I love spending time at home. I don't like working at home, but I love being at home. And I think that's been a bit of a revelation just over the last year or so as well. Like, and it's changed my relationship with, that idea of constantly going, right, I've got friends that are like, that bought their houses 2 or 3 years after I bought my house, but they're already onto their third already, and and I'm like, I don't want to keep up with that. And then I just sort of think about these crazy mortgages people have, and like this constant kind of like pressure, to upscale, and every time I've thought about leaving my house, not leaving the house like I did this morning, but leaving my house and never coming back because I'm going to another one, I just think, but where would it go? Like, what would I need that is so significantly better than this? I live on the beach. I've got like a great shared garden. I've got lovely neighbours. And I just like. And it's a very old house as well, steeped in history, and you just sort of think like all of these ingredients, and I'm like, I'd have to like find something really, really, really cool, to convince me to go.
But is that then looking at that and just being back to being present, being grateful for where you are?
That's
right
exactly
now.
it. That's exactly it. And the the old adage is kind of like, it's that sort of the past creates the sort of the the fear, doesn't it? And then the future creates anxiety or whatever. And it's like, and the present can be something else completely, and you get to decide, and you get to build that. And that was a couple of years ago. That was one of my my New Year's goals, if you like, was to just be more present and really sort of lean into that and learn how to do that.
How are you getting on with that?
Yeah, I think I do all right. And I do all right. And whenever I do experience like low points, you can always trace it back to some kind of. For me, it's the future. Like the past is I've got quite a happy relationship with the past. The future fucking terrifies me. and I and whenever I'm in a low point, it's usually stemmed in what's gonna happen, and usually whatever I think's gonna happen, the opposite happens. So I'm not very good at calling it, So I just need to make peace with that.
It's hard though. Again, it's back to those external noises that are put into from society, right?
Yeah.
About that that we should be at certain points in our life. We should have certain things at our life, but if you do take them away and just go, like you say, just be really, really grateful for where you are. I remember being in a point where I had a place in Essex and I wanted to get a place here. Just wanted, like my wife said, I don't want to rent anymore, just want to own our own house, Then you own your own house and you go, oh, we've done that now. Yeah. We just want to do this to the house now. Yeah. It's ours, so we need to do this. Let's just, what? And then again, back to COVID, you go, I live near the beach. Yeah. In an amazing place in the world. We're healthy and, let's just try and be. But there is the other side of it that I guess I'll be keen to ask about the creativity side and always thinking about new things and always that we're always still striving for something else.
Yeah, well, I think I know where you're going, and I think the question that I come back to, and I still haven't quite found the answer to yet, is how can you be ambitious without having ambitions? Yeah. And for me, ambitiousness is a behaviour. It's not a set of goals. Yeah. Whereas ambitions are a set of goals. I want to build this business. I want to develop that brand. I want to make this amount of money. I want to buy this house. Whereas being ambitious is a behaviour, and particularly with something like the brand development work that I do, it's all about vision and values, and that's where you start, and trying to get to the most successful behaviours of a business or a group of people or a team, and that's much better than going, okay, like creating aspirational values or visions or whatever, like this is what we want to become, or this is what we want to create, or this is what we want to embody. And it's like, no, like look at what you've already done. Look at the great things that you have achieved, and those could be really macro, as in like, oh yeah, we made $5 million or whatever, or we created this event, or or it can be really micro in the sense of like, oh well, last week we helped so and so to do this, or we fixed that problem or we got recognized for our ability to be caring and empathetic in our work or something. And like if you look at all of these sort of successes, and it's like, okay, so what are the consistent behaviors that allow those successes to happen? And if you can start to unpick that and start to articulate it, all of a sudden very honest and authentic values for people and teams can appear. And they're real, because they're not kind of like aspirational, like if we behave like this or if we do this, then we'll achieve X. Like it's like when we do, this is us at our best. Like, so let's be at our best as much as we can. Let's be as consistent as we can with our very best behaviours. And when new people join, like we show them what those behaviours are, and we want them to show us that they have the capacity for that behaviour, as we meet them and as we bring them in and so on. And appreciate this isn't what we're here to talk about, but
I love
but for me it all comes down to behaviour. Like behaviour and questions are the driving force of the things that get us wherever we're going. Like if we want to go to good places, questions and behaviour, those are the two things to master, I think.
But you relate that, like you just alluded to with business. Like, I always talk about culture being the bloodline of a business. If you create a culture like as you're describing on those behaviours, not on like how we're going to get to, we're going to achieve, etc. But based on those values and those core beliefs and behaviours at that time, that's a foundation for a strong culture.
Yeah,
right?
totally. It's like Peter Drucker says, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Right.
And I've always loved that. But then what I've been trying to work out over the last, 5 years or so is kind of like, but how do you turn culture in, how do you combine the two? Like, where's the meeting point between culture and strategy? So that you know, how can you capture, the most, important, impactful, authentic beliefs and behaviors of an individual or a group of individuals, and then turn that into something that is understandable, documentable, repeatable, which is effectively a strategy, right? And I actually ran a session for some students at the music college that I lecture at last week, and it was all around music marketing. And I don't literally these days I'm so far away from any form of social media or anything like that. I hate the stuff. But they all go in and they're like, right, we want to get 100,000 followers on Spotify, and we want to get, this many, we want to create viral content for TikTok. And I'm like, sorry to tell you guys, but I can't help you with that. That's not what I'm here to talk to you about. We need to think about different goals this week, and then really driving it kind of what do you care about? What causes do you want to, center your work around? What do you want to draw attention to? Draw people's attention to in your work? And you can do that as a musician through your music, and you can do it through your brand as an individual, or as an artist. But it's kind of once you know that, it's that cause creation. In our world of business, we have problems and solutions, and in the art world, I see it as cause and creation. What do you want to draw people's attention to as a cause, and then how do you do that with art and music and craft and so on? And it's the same thing. It's the same dynamic as problem solution. You just flip the language in order for it to be more accessible to people in different spaces. And all of a sudden, marketing becomes so much easier for people, because then it's I'm not marketing in order to get 100,000 followers, or listeners on Spotify and so many followers on TikTok or something. I'm doing it because I now know what I care about. I know what I want other people to care about in order to sort of mobilize change around that issue. And now I know what I'm going to make in order to drive that change, both in myself and in others. And I think that's the when we talk about kind of experiencing creative freedom in our work versus creating value or something, that's the big difference, is understanding what's the heart of it, and it's the the beliefs and behaviors that effectively then become the how-to list, the internal how-to list to make that happen. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I really do. And it's so, it really, the journey I've been on, I guess, the last couple of years, especially doing this, is so much along that narrative of trying to find out who I really am and what I'm trying to achieve, and who I'm trying to bring my authentic self regularly on a daily basis, and how I go about doing that. And I try, and this has given me a bit of a platform to try and achieve that, I think. And then trying to find out what that message is you want to get out there and what you want to share, and everything that aligns with you. The other stuff, the followers, finances, all of those things are.
Well, if I were to ask you to describe, what defines the success of this podcast for you personally, what would it be?
It's a really, really good question. And I think for me, in all honesty, I think the connection that I get with people sitting in this room is far beyond anything else I've ever done in my life.
Yeah. But if you were to measure that connection by the depth and the quality of the connections that you've had versus how many connections you've been able to make, what's more salient? What would you be more proud of?
The depth.
Yeah.
The depth of those connections, definitely. Because that's something And whether I'd have had 5 conversations or 500, I can't. I guess I can't look at anything else I've done in my life where I've been able to, because people were able to sit opposite me and share their thoughts, their story, their journey on a where there's just us in a room and everything else is sort of taken away, and they're able to open up, maybe, hopefully, create an environment for people to be able to do that. And I guess because of being so curious about people's journeys, I find that so fascinating, and that's hopefully where that connection comes from, which is, you're right, and actually I never looked at it like that, but actually how much value there is for me personally.
Yeah. And then when you're sort of thinking about what comes next, like one of my favourite questions to ask people and to myself is kind of like, what do you want to experience more of in your work? You know, it's such a nicer question than kind of like, what are you going to do next? Or like, you know, and I really feel like our experience of our work is much more important than the accolades that we collect along the way. You know, and if you're anything like me, you know, you achieve something and then, you know, within an hour of you achieving it, it's like it's behind you. Do you know what I mean? Like you're done with it. And whereas actually the thing that's memorable and the thing that like you don't forget about it is, you know, what was, you know, that those pinnacle peak experiences that you had, and those come through kind of like, you know, getting really deep and in with either a piece of work or a project or a person, you know, and having an experience of work, and that's much, you know, that's so much more. You know, again, it's that path of least regret thing of like, what, you know, would you rather have 5 life-changing podcasts, or would you rather have 500 kind of podcasts? Yeah, it's pretty. Absolutely, no, but
Okay, I'm just going to say something about one of our sponsors, Riverval. The world of cars, vans and minibuses is often a pain point for many of us. The hassle of finding the right vehicle, let alone looking after it, are all more things to add to our lists as busy people. Riverval's mission is to make motoring manageable, and that's why they provide leasing, purchasing, servicing and vehicle management. So whether you have one family car or a fleet of vans for your business, Riverval are your trusted vehicle supplier. Visit www.riverval.co.uk. Okay, let's jump back to the podcast. One thing I want to touch, you mentioned there about creative freedom, and you talk about that a lot in the book. I'm keen because I do just want to just track back a little bit and go back to like the education piece and you being at school, and I'd be keen to look at how much we're stifling creativity within that system, within our system now. Like what you're teaching your kids, as you alluded to earlier, which for me is an amazing way of teaching.
Well, the irony is I teach adults, so I teach, I teach at MA level, music college, and quite often
with your daughter.
Oh, with my daughter.
So I'm talking about even like.
Oh, right. Okay.
I mean, talking about it, and then leading up how you teach, obviously with adults as well. But even I'm talking about as you sort of spoke about earlier about talking about teaching your kids, your daughter about the way of looking at things, and obviously potentially how you was with your like the question your mum asked you recently. Do you know what I mean? When you, like you said, that's potentially not what most parents would have asked at that stage. So you've been brought up in that sort of environment, which it looks like you're going to pass on to your kids as well, to your daughter as well. So what? But as a society and as the way the education system set up,
quite. My mum's just completed. She graduated last week. She's just, she's 70 this year. Well, she's just turned 70 this year, and she's just got a degree in fine art. And she always jokes when she's like with me and Emmy, like, because Emmy loves art. Like that's her favourite thing is drawing and colouring and all these sorts of things. And my mum always jokes that, like, we spend so much time teaching kids to colour in between the lines, and then all of a sudden I'm 70 and I'm got a fine art degree and being taught that no, you have to colour outside the lines. Like, and it's like, so why do we have to learn the thing in order to then unlearn it? Why can't we just come from a place of unlearning to start with? But have you ever come across a musician called Jacob Collier? amazing young musician, like mid-20s, something like that, multi-instrumentalist, and just sort of just oozes like musicality. And he's got this wonderful quote. He gets asked. His music is so complex and just has so many things going on in it. And he gets asked in this sort of university lecture type thing. Some guy puts his hand up and goes, "Jacob, has anyone told you that less is more?" And he just kind of laughs off the question. He goes, "Oh, you sound just like my GCSE music teacher." and she always used to say, "Jacob, don't you know that less is more?" And he said, I'll never forget what I said to her. I turned around to her and said, "Yes, but in order to know what less is, you need to experience more first." And I love that. Like, I really love that. And for me, it just captured my approach to kind of like just making stuff in general, because it's, like I said, it's embracing chaos a little bit, or just appreciating chaos. But education, I've got a feeling and a theory with this, which is that that what education fails to do is to teach people and children as whole people. Maths looks at children as mathematicians. Science looks at children as scientists. Art looks at children as artists. And I look back on my education, and I look back at the things that I was good at, and I think about my tendency now to just not care or put my attention to things that I don't enjoy or I'm not very good at. It's sort of one of my little policies. But I definitely had that naturally as a child as well. So I was sort of like just coasting through most things and then peaking in a few things. And if even just one of my teachers at school had paid attention to me as a whole person, they would have gone, "Oh, okay, you're good at writing and design and acting," which is basically where I get public speaking from, right? And it's like, you would be great in advertising, or you would be great in marketing, or something like this. So why the fuck did I have to spend 10 years working in IT to figure out that was a terrible place for me to be? Like, why did no one ever step back enough from my education? Like, and clearly the attention is there because they were able to nurture me through all of these subjects and teach me all of this stuff, but not one of them was able to step back and look at me as a whole person. And now when I just spent 2 years I had a department role at a music college, and I've stepped back from that now, and I'm just a sort of visiting lecturer, if you like. But for me, that underpins everything. And I'll have students come to me and be like, "Oh, I know this isn't like your thing, Tobes, but do you mind if I just talk to you about like my album art, or do you mind if I just talk to you about like something that's going on with my family at the moment, or do you mind if I just talk to you about something that like I'm not too sure about with my career outside of music at the moment?" I'm like, of course. Like, I can't be an expert at all of these things, but like my promise to you is that I will always like coach, mentor, tutor you as a whole person. So nothing's off the table. And I'm just like, I can just see like, and I'm not saying that I'm very good at that. I'm just saying that I think it's like an important philosophy to take into education as an educator. And I wish that that's what somebody had done for me as a young person, had come in and looked at me as a whole person and then told me what my options and opportunities were.
I mean, it's such a brilliant way of looking at it. You go, if only, like, what is it then that we sit here and we can recognise this and we can talk about this, and I talk about this subject a lot on here. What is it that the powers that be we can't look at what is clearly an archaic system and not be able to recognise that?
I think not as individuals, but as societies, we overvalue predictability, because predictability creates stability, and stability creates whatever the fuck stability creates. But we need that, like, as an economy, and we need that as a society and so on. And in order to create predictability, we need like templates, and we need narratives, and we need frameworks, and we need to work within the known knowns. And we're very much afraid of the known unknowns, and we're terrified of the unknown unknowns. I think what's happening, particularly with the sort of movement in neurodiversity at the moment, is what I'm seeing is, for a very long time, we've created this sort of type A behaviour that's required to succeed in work and in family, but mostly work.
Yeah.
And we prioritise people that naturally have those behaviours, and then we prioritise the potential of people that have the potential to show those behaviours. So we end up sort of having the type A behaviours, which are, showing up to work in this way and that way and this way, and communicating in this way and that way and so on, and feeling, magnetised towards certain rewards and so on. But I think what we're realising as a part of this sort of neurodiversity movement is that far, far, far fewer of us are type A people. But we've designed a education system and a workplace system and, and even an economic system around type A behaviour. And where we probably, as a society, might have seen 70% of the population as type A people, it's probably now closer to 30%, which is not the majority at all. And now we're learning that other people want to communicate in different ways, and want to be communicated with in different ways, and want to be incentivized in different ways, and want to design balance in their life around different ways. And the world is adapting. Like, you can see adaptation happening, and particularly in both very sort of in high performing organizations, where they realize that who works for the organization is very important, and no, it doesn't make much sense on a spreadsheet to give people generous parental leave, or it doesn't make sense on a spreadsheet to allow people to work from home 80% of the time, or whatever these different changes and improvements and developments that are happening are. But when you look at it at a human level, of course it makes sense, because why on earth would I want to pay Sam £100,000 a year to come to my company, only to leave because he's having a kid, or leave because he can't, because you can't communicate over email in the way that that somebody else in the organisation might, or any of these parameters that, big or small, that shape your experience of work and essentially your desire to be there. And I believe that that's the shift that's happening, and I think it's a positive thing. But it's not without its naysayers, and I think that work is probably changing quicker than education is. Education is a much harder ship to change and turn around, and we can create new options for people, like the music college I work at. Like, that's a private organisation, right? And it's just seeing a gap. It goes, oh, okay, when people leave college, their options are this, but their behaviours and desires and ambitions are telling them to do this. So let's design an education system around that enables that. And and often we do need these sort of like risks to be taken by private companies or whatever, but hopefully it filters down eventually. But education needs to understand that it's preparing people for something that is so different to what it used to be, and I'm sure this is the trend throughout history. But time changes faster as time moves on. So what used to take sort of 2 decades to come into effect now takes a decade. Maybe it takes 5 years. Maybe it takes a fucking month. So we need to learn to change those systems faster, maybe. I know where I'm going with this now.
No, I'm completely with you, and I think you're right. Actually, I think business and the world, different businesses have cottoned on to that a bit quicker than the education system, and it does need, because ultimately, if it doesn't filter down and we don't change it, we're just preparing this next generation. I'm worried about my kids. That next generation. What are we preparing them for going into a world that we're preparing them for a world that was 30, 40, 50 years ago? Pre-AI
world.
Yeah, exactly. Why are we not? just we've got a curriculum that is archaic, and we just need to look. That is one element of it needs to change. The other element.
I don't think it's the curriculum that's archaic. I think it's the convergence of the curriculum that's archaic, and it's that siloing of subject matters. And if you think about like the best careers in the world and the best sort of like individuals that you've worked with, they're not kind of like, they don't, you know what it's like when you meet someone that's just like obsessed with one thing and they've got that sort of narrow mindset. They end up not being able to function in society particularly well because they've got such a narrow focus. And they might go on to like enable something exciting or significant, but maybe they won't. Maybe they'll just be a fucking nerd and not know how to exist. And really, the magic trick to being happy and successful in life, perhaps, is understanding what the sort of 3 or 4 things are that you're interested in, and then working out how you stick them together to create something new. And that's what education should do. Like it's like. Don't prepare someone to be a mathematician. Prepare someone to know how to leverage maths in order to achieve something exciting, build something exciting, enable something exciting. And I think as long as we keep having this very sort of like, right, now it's period 3 and it's maths, now it's period 4 and it's science, and no one's taking that kind of like helicopter view and going, this is how you use these 3 or 4 skills together to create something new. And that's like, that could be one person's job in one school. Like, just looking at how the interconnectedness between topics and disciplines and capabilities works. And no one does it.
Yeah.
No one does it.
I love that. I love it. Yeah. And it's one of them, like you said, you hope conversations like this, people just to start to look at stuff differently. If we can, as a society, if we can start to look at which we are, like you said, with neurodiversity, with lots of things there's a shift in so many things, and I think I'm hoping that the shift in education will get to a point where things like that do happen, where people do look at it from a different view, and that everyone. The thing I love the most that you said about is actually just looking at every single child as a whole person, not just potentially that's a skill set, you're good at that.
Well, I think one of the big realizations for me, as I've already said, is like I wish someone had done that for me, and because I know that. Like now I know that it's important to offer it to others and to make sure that I'm doing that, and that's whether I'm working in an education setting, whether I'm working in a corporate setting, whether I'm working in like the TED thing, and like and working with if I'm looking at working with like preparing someone to give like a TEDx talk or something. It's kind of like, okay, well, let's look at your whole life, like, and where are the experiences and the stories that we can bring in, and it's not necessarily all about this like hammer on the nail career that you've had. It's about looking at you as a whole person, and how do you present this change that you want to create, because that's what makes it believable. And I just I'm almost convincing myself more and more as I talk about it right now to you, like how important this is.
It really is. It really is. Look, talk to me then about like, because it seems like just talking to you as I am now, and where the place you're potentially in right now, you've got to maybe over the last 2-3 years, or in your mindset. Talk to me about that. Like leaving school, you talked about working in IT or technology for a few years. The different hats that you have wore, I guess, over the years. Talk to me about some of them and what this looks like, and how you've got to this place now.
Yeah, all right. For the gift of context. So when I first started, so what's the last 10 years look like? I started working in this college, and then became a part of the IT team in the college, and then there was a big company that kind of like that owned all of these colleges. So I went and started working for the big company and overseeing how technology worked and how IT worked, and what I became really interested in at the time. And there was some really, really cool organisations in Brighton around the time, one called City Camp, which was like a sort of conference event type thing around social change. And there was a consultancy in the town called Nixon McInnes, which was run by Tom Nixon, Will McInnes, if you know those guys. And then they were really big champions of like democratic open work, and I became obsessed with what they were doing and that movement through them. and for some reason, in my early 20s, I was gifted a management role of a team, and I was like, right, what can I mess up here? And it was, so I started playing around, and you can't be that innovative with the sort of level of technology that we were working with, but you could be innovative with the people, right? And you could change how we managed and led the people. And 10 years ago, IT was even more stuffier than it is now. Now it's kind of cool and sexy to work in technology, right? But back then it was kind of like, it was the IT crowd, and so I was Jen coming in, pretending that I knew how the mouse worked, it wasn't that bad. And actually what was really, we started to create these new ways of working, particularly with technology professionals, and that got the attention of the industry, and I was able to then start writing and going to conferences and talking and stuff. And then that's how I transitioned out of IT and into events and marketing, was that there was this message, there was this idea, and we needed to, and there was a community of people that were like, this is cool, let's go and tell more people about it. So I got to become a part of that. And then and I just went through this was my first big career change, I suppose, was going from IT to conferences and events. And that's where I sort of started to be able to exercise things like my writing skills and my event organizing skills, if that's a thing, and just creating compelling ideas and messages and getting them out there. And that taught me the value of marketing and content creation. And I had a couple of roles at different organizations there, including that, the very successful company full of unsuccessful people. And then that's when I sort of learnt, and around the time that I was sort of starting to really hone those skills of communication, particularly writing. That was around the time that my dad passed away, and that was kind of like the combination of these two kind of things happening, the sort of peak in that particular part of my career, and then this, I don't know, trough in terms of I don't know, personal stability or whatever. I was just like, screw it, got to go out and do this on my own. And that's when I started my first company, which was a content marketing company for technology brands. And I did that for a couple of years, and we also, with my co-founder at the time, we started building technology ourselves as well, and the agency did really well. The building technology bit didn't, and then it all fell apart and we lost the whole business. And maybe a story for another day, I don't know, but this sort of sense of loss and failure that comes with losing your business.
What did you feel at that time? What was it that was that?
I was just very angry. I blamed myself.
Really?
And I think it was just, naivety cost us the business, really. But also, we thought we were doing something smart, and we took on investors and so on, and we just didn't know that world, and also I think we had not ideas beyond our station, because I don't believe in that as necessary as a premise, but I don't think we understood what it took to do what we were trying to do. And perhaps we wanted it for the wrong reasons as well.
What reasons were? If you go back there, what was it?
If I were to be highly critical of myself in my early 20s, I wanted to be like Mark Zuckerberg. Do you know what I mean? I wanted, and I wanted to be the cool tech guy in the t-shirt and the blazer, kind of running around, fucking getting attention, and I thought I was passionate about my product, and I suppose what really when I scratch, or not even scratch, but fucking dig under the surface of why I was doing what I was doing, it's because I'd been working in a marketing role for 3 or 4 years, and it was and I was sold this wonderfully creative world of work that turned out to just be spreadsheets and reports, and predictable predictable results was the metric of success, and I wanted to be and do creative things, and I wanted other people to be able to experience creative things, and it frustrated me that the desire for for uncreative things was getting in the way of creative people enjoying themselves at work. And I just couldn't believe that 75% of the marketers that I worked with spent most of their time looking at spreadsheets. You know, it blew my mind. And
stifling that creativity that you...
Yeah, and attracting attracting uncreative people to an industry that desperately needs creativity in order to succeed. And I suppose that's what I'm now getting back in touch with sort of now and in the last couple of years. It's like, okay, well, how do I redesign my work now? Not around sort of being flipping Mark Zuckerberg, you know, and building, you know, sort of tech empires, but just genuinely finding lots of different... This is where the different hats thing comes in. It's just like, how many different opportunities are there to help people experience creativity in their work, and including and especially me. And then when you look at that as a whole, like, and you go, okay, well, it's not just about people at work anymore. It's about, you know, this is the journey. This is where the parenting bubble starts to come in. It's just like, okay, well, now it's about kids as well, and young people. And, you know, I work with a couple of charities that specialise in working with young people and youth, and that's the impact that I want to have there as well. I want to make sure that, like, people have the opportunities to feel... for them to feel like they can value their own creativity and ideas, for other people to value their creativity and ideas, and then to create the pathways for them to pursue those as opportunities, so that they don't have to spend 10 years working in IT in order to figure out that they actually just want to be an artist, you know?
And it's again that overriding message is about back to trying to create this narrative in society that, especially within that creative freedom element, about following those dreams. It's back to that thing, isn't it? Back to being kids and following those dreams and having the... And I think that's by listening to you talk, it's about getting to a point in our lives where we understand that and be able to go, it's okay to just do that, and okay, that's not really works, that's fine, I'm gonna do this now, and that's okay, that's really good, I really love doing it. Because actually, do we fear that part of society, again back to that narrative of trying to... There's a fear factor of trying to go down this route, because actually I'm not sure what that looks like.
Well, I still have a deep-seated fear of failure, and that goes against kind of like the narratives and philosophies that I sort of like shout at myself in the mirror. but I still have a great fear of failure, and I don't try things because I'm scared that they won't work out.
And yet you're the lots of things that you do and the stuff you talk about, and the book especially as well, about that creative freedom, allowing you to do them things that you love. You do still... You are still following that path to a degree, aren't you?
Yeah, and I'm probably, you know, even though saying what I've just said, like, I'm probably still an outlier in terms of like the number of things that I try compared to most, but I'm not afraid of starting things. I think that's one thing. Like, I'll always start, but then as soon as it comes to that kind of like, okay, now you have to try and make this work, you know, now you have to sort of like commit to like putting this in front of people and grow in it. Like, I think that's where I get stuck. And that's partly a skills-based thing, but also, you know, but if I was brave enough, I would just learn the skill or hire the skill, you know?
What is that fear of... Where do you think that comes from, that fear of failure? Is it the fact that, like, look at it, I guess the business that you set out to be a big tech giant that didn't potentially work out, is that stem from that, or before then, or...
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I've got I think just to turn you into my therapist for 90 seconds, like, a lot of my fear comes from like that sense of loss, you know, and that comes from, you know, it comes from losing a parent, it comes from losing friends, and it comes from losing businesses, you know, and like, there's nothing like, you know, death and the collapse of a brand, you know, to create a real, very, you know, this is what loss feels like terms, you know, fucking hurts. So then not doing things that could potentially lead to it not working protects me from loss. And I guess that's the battle right now, is to be like, no, okay, no, it's okay. Like, but then, you know, the other side of the coin is like, I'm a big fan of kind of like knowing what starting something feels like, and you've got to see some material version of it in order to know whether you want to run at it or not. And what's a good example? So earlier this year, I started like an AI magazine, and it was like everything in the magazine was written and illustrated by AI, but not through the purposes of trying to trick people into thinking that this is real people. It's like, no, these are robots trying to form a relationship with you, you know. And like one of the first things was to create this kind of like AI editorial identity, you know, that sort of like said, I am a robot, and these are my feelings, and these are my intentions, and this is what I strive to do in terms of connecting with humans, and then this is the content and the media that I want to create in order to do it, and then creating these magazines. And I did a couple of issues of the magazines, and ended up like going to speak at a couple of AI events because of it, and all of that sort of thing. And for a moment in time, I was this sort of like AI expert, you know, and then gone because I didn't want to be that anymore. And I was like, cool, yeah, I experienced being an AI expert for 3 months, and like, and I was like, yeah, but then I'm very happy with what happened there. Like, I got to experience doing that work, and what do I want to experience more of in my work at that time? I want to see what I can do with robots, and I want to see what that can do to achieve bridging the gap between humanity and AI. Do I want that to be my job? No. Do I want to be able to feel like I've experienced that? Yes. So how do I then judge that? Do I judge that as a failure because I didn't get past issue 3, or do I see it as a success because I got to experience what I wanted? And like, I could sit at my computer between like this podcast recording and my daughter finishing school and knock out another issue, because it's so easy, because robots make it easy. So it's not the act of the work that's hard. And it comes down to direction of travel, I think. Like, and this is where it comes back to that ambitions versus ambitiousness. Is, do I have the ambition to create this? No. Do I have the ambitiousness to try? Yes.
Love that. Because actually, again, it's so much of that is back to our own measurement of success. Right?
Yeah.
That is the key. And that's what so much of the podcast is about the metric in which we measure success. And so many people you would sit opposite, maybe, or you talk to about different business ventures and different things that you've done, and so many, because society is really stuck on this financial status is where the success lies of a business or anything, that if that's the metric in which we measure it in, then maybe that's not been successful because it's not done X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, one of the things that I, as a sort of TEDx organizer and curator, putting that hat on for a moment, I have a sort of love-hate relationship with TED and TEDx because of this, because in the same way that money does, or that job titles do, and so on, I think I have this sort of like poison chalice in one hand and this sort of, you know, beautiful glass of champagne in the other, which is, you know, the sort of the success that comes along with giving a TEDx talk, and I really, what am I trying to share here? The people that I think that I get to work with that go and do these great talks are the people that are least interested in getting up on stage and talking about the work. So I see my job in that role as like, I have to go and be a salesperson. I have to go and sell the idea of coming up on stage and talking about this thing. And I have to convince them that it's a good opportunity for them and the audience. I have to convince them that like they have, you know, the skills and capabilities as a public speaker to do it. I have to convince them that the stories and experiences that they're bringing to the stage are valuable to to other people beyond just their ecosystem. The people, and this is always a very unpopular opinion, or a very unpopular thing for people to hear, I suppose. But the people that I'm least interested in working with are the people that want to do it the most.
Because they want it for the status.
Yeah, because they're being driven by an ambition, and they're not doing it for the audience, or they're not doing it for the community. They're doing it for them. They want to serve this idea inside them, which is that, if I do a TEDx talk, then I'm successful now. And
because it's that external validation.
Yeah, it's like it's getting
on my website. I've done a TEDx talk. Obviously, people will then look at that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I have friends and colleagues that do this, but they give a TEDx talk and they change their job title to TEDx speaker, and it's just it's a bit like saying I went skydiving once, and now I'm a skydiver.
I've done skydiving once. I'm not a skydiver. I probably won't do it again. Great experience.
So it's kind of. And so I and again, it's for me, it's just the ultimate analogy of kind of healthy success versus unhealthy success in terms of metrics and so on, and it just shows up in my work quite plainly in that sense, I guess. And I love working with people that understand that a change is needed in order to create some great benefit or impact, and that there is a risk, and that risk is very normal. This risk in front of us is the norm. We're heading towards this place, and if we can change how we behave and what we believe, we can move away from that risk and towards some form of prosperity or benefit. And those are the people that I love getting my hands on and going, right, we're going to write a really fucking great talk that's going to change how people think about this thing, and let's write the defining talk on this topic or on this question or on this idea, and that gives me the opportunity to exercise my skills as well and my awareness of that space and so on. And use them as kind of like clay, there's this beautifully crafted clay, in this wonderful colour, and we get to create something magical and unique with it. And it's a collaborative exercise. And the least, and then the people I don't want to work with are the people that already know. Yeah, I know what the idea is. I know what this is. I know what people need to hear. And it's like, well, I can't. This isn't going to be a collaboration. This is I'm just a conduit.
Just giving you a platform to go and do what you think people want to hear.
And it might be fun and exciting in the moment, but I promise you it'll be totally forgettable.
This is Geo. Geo runs a scarf company. Geo doesn't see the need for telecoms. Everybody uses mobiles now. But can a mobile really be a business phone? Geo is having coffee with a client, Gabby. Well, actually, Geo prefers acacia leaf tea. But what happens when someone calls? It could be a big new deal. Surely it would be rude to take the call? But many people hate leaving messages. They may just call a competitor instead. What can Geo do? The answer is simple. Turn the mobile into a business phone. With the Go Giraffe app, Geo can quickly transfer the call. Or, before the meeting, Geo can simply use the app to divert calls. No more missed calls, lost deals or unhappy customers. Turn your mobile into a business phone today. Go Giraffe.
Let's touch, because there's so many listeners, I'm sure, and this is why it's so good to talk to you about it in this form, is that because there are probably so many people out there listening going, I'd love to do a TED Talk. For what reasons? And I guess some of the things you've alluded to there about the best advice you can give someone that wants to do a TED Talk, would that be it? It's not about don't look at the
and it's very easy for me to just chuck everybody into one of two buckets, and obviously life is much more nuanced than that, and if that's a goal that you have, understand, do some work, or just take some time to take stock of kind of who are you doing that for, and what are you trying to create for those people, and then what would 25 other ways of achieving that thing be? And I always think like particularly if you want to be a speaker, like that's what you want your job to be, like doing 10 paid keynote talks is going to be far more fruitful for your career than doing one unpaid TEDx talk. I promise you. So try that first. and see if you get a feel for it. And if you suddenly realize that speaking on stage at the dentistry expo or something like that ain't the way that your message is going to get heard and isn't going to transform people's lives, then maybe trying to use the TEDx format might be the best way of doing it. Like, but at the same time, it's like, we live in the age of the content creator, and one of the most beautiful things about the age of the content creator is you have so much control over your message, where it goes, who sees it, the impact that it has when it gets there, and so on. And if you effectively license out your ideas and your message to other brands and organizations, because that's what you're doing. Like, if you come and do a talk at TEDx Brighton, I don't even own that. Yeah. That goes up to Big Ted, and they can do whatever they want with it, including not publish it. and whereas, what would your message be like if you just owned it and owned the platform? And like, if that's really what you're trying to do, if you're trying to drive a change, like, take every opportunity that you can to own your message. And if one of those ways of drawing attention to that is speaking at TED or whatever, go for it. But don't, just please take it off your bucket list. Please take it off your kind of like, I'll be successful when list. Because it's not gonna create that for you. No matter how many people are selling you Facebook adverts that tell you that it will.
I just love that message that and he said, because I still remember, because I'll be brutally honest. I think when I started following you and I first saw TEDx, I got into TEDx and I first saw it come up, and I remember watching something. Oh God, wouldn't that be really cool? And then I remember you put a post out about it, and we spoke about it previously, where you said, actually, don't apply necessarily to do a TEDx talk. Wait to be asked to do a TEDx talk, because if your message is the right message, and like you said, you'll find the people that actually have not got the ambition to have, on my website, I'm a TEDx talker, but actually I've got something really impactful to say, and it's going to change how people.
And people may disagree with this, but like, from just putting an event organizer's hat on, it's just another event.
Yeah.
It's just another event. Yeah. Like, and tomorrow in the same venue there'll be another one. Yeah. And like it's there's nothing special. We get like, we have we have a pretty high turnover volunteer program, or like a high capacity volunteer program. People come and go from the volunteer program because they think they'll get to work on Sexy TED. But then they suddenly realise that when they're just fetching like sort of sandwiches at lunchtime, or they're sort of like putting together an email campaign or something, it's like, it's just another event, man. You know what I mean? Not to water down my own brand.
But it's still amazing to buy loads of tickets.
But it's a life-changing opportunity for every member of the audience, and tickets are on sale now, the 5th of April, the Brighton Dome, TEDx Brighton.
Boom, and we got it. And I will put a thing in the show notes. Then just as we're coming towards the end, there was one thing from the book I just wanted to touch on briefly before we go on to our definition of success and what that looks like. What everyone will know the Simon Sinek Start With Why. Really found it fascinating in your take on that in the book.
Yeah, I mean, the Simon Sinek thing stands up. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. But
I loved your thing. I'd love you to just share a little bit about that.
Well, my argument with Start With Why is to start with what, but only in the context of how you explain things. Like my life's work is just about explaining things and making people believe in things, right? And I think one of why can often be one of the hardest things to do internally, but it can also be one of the most distracting things to do externally. So, for example, if you were to say to me, Toby, I'd really like to spend time with you exploring the depth of your experiences and understanding like what all these different things mean to you, and going through your like life story and unpacking that and figuring out like where we can go, where the opportunities are to pack that up into lessons for other people to follow, and and you sort of go for all that. I'm like, I mean, Sam, that sounds great, but like and then, on a podcast. I'm like, oh yeah, on the podcast. Yeah, I'll come on a podcast with you. That sounds great, and like, but if you start going into the kind of like the depths of why we're gonna do something before you tell me what it is that we're doing, and it all comes down to creating expectation. So, I'm a big fan of the very first thing that you want to try and communicate with someone at the moment that you start communicating with them is what your and theirs expectation of this conversation should be, right? So. Again, something from the book, like something that someone said to me once is I wear my objectives on my sleeves, and I really like that because it's just like, so I'm going into a conversation, if I'm trying to sell you something, it's like, right, Sam, can we meet up on Thursday because I want to try and see if you want to come on board as a sponsor for this event, and I want to tell you more about it because, or like, Sam, I'm having a problem with my kids at the moment. I just need another dad to sit down with and talk to, because, and like, just tell me what we're doing, create an expectation. Why doesn't create an expectation? It creates curiosity, it creates reason, but it doesn't create expectation. And this is just and Simon Sinek is just a marketer. Like, he's just an advertiser, just a really fucking good one, and I can't touch that. I can't scratch that. So like, maybe my theory doesn't stack up, but I think one of the mistakes that we just often make, particularly when we highly subscribe to start with why, is that we think that translates into what we make. And I'm a big fan of helping people understand what they make and then how that thing gets people to believe in the cause or the important belief at the heart of that. But you've got to tell people what's happening. And I think that's where we get let down, and particularly when we go, I used to work on these big website builds and content creation pieces and conferences and events and things, and used to work with all of these sort of like smart consultants and stuff, and they just, and all this fluff and waffle, and if it just, it's like a picture frame, if you show me a picture frame, like, I know what's going to go inside it. It's a fucking picture, like, but but the content is the interesting bit, but without a picture frame, like, it's just it's a piece of paper on the floor, but now it's a picture on the wall, and that creates my expectation. Does that make sense? Really, I don't want to over-labour it because I don't think it's that complicated, really.
Because that's one of the reasons I wanted to put that question in, and I wanted to talk to you about and wanted you to share it on this platform, just because it really resonated with. I've read Start With Why, I loved it, and I was but just looking at it from a different perspective, and I really understood it, and I thought it was a great way. Again, I'm not going to plug, but let's definitely read this book. No good bookstore.
Well, the Start With Why thing, I think it's great advice, and it's great advice for figuring out things for yourself. But I think it quite often, and I don't know or think this is necessarily the fault of Simon Sinek, but like, it often gets then packaged up as advice on how to sell and market things, and I'm not saying that we have to take the power away from why. We just have to change the order of where it appears, and get really good at saying what succinctly. When you're at some networking event and someone goes, so what do you do? And they all stand there and they go, well, we create, really wonderful experiences for people that want to go on journeys to da-da-da-da-da. And the way that we do that is, and then if you're ever curious about da-da-da-da, and you're like, oh my God, mate, like, what are you? And you say, oh, I'm a travel agent. And you're like, oh, brilliant. Okay. And I'm a travel agent that specializes in helping people go on like the most whirlwind adventures of their entire lives in Southeast Asia. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm Asia sounds cool, But if you try and whittle on and like try and sell me the experience or whatever, like, I'm just going to get confused because I don't know what the wrapper is yet. It's just like, show me like in half, a dozen chocolate bars with no wrappers on. They all look the same, So.
I love it. I know, it's just, like I say, for me, just that different perspective on it and what that looks like, which I wanted you to share, and I'm glad you did so.
Thanks for asking.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Right. We are coming towards the end.
All right.
And as always, we know that the podcast, the tagline, it's all about helping the world to see success differently. Right? With the different hats you've wore, where you've been, are now, where you are going, please give me your definition of success.
It's really easy. Success is a feeling. It's not a destination or a thing that we can kind of aim for or strive for. Like, it's just a feeling. I can wake up today and feel successful. I can wake up today and feel unsuccessful. I can wake up today and feel unsuccessful, and around lunchtime I'll start feeling successful again. If I pin it to goals and obstacles and goals and objectives and things that I don't reach, does that mean that I can't feel successful anymore? Have I just cheated myself out of feeling successful? One of the early TEDx speakers I worked with was Jordan Stevens, and he finished his talk with, shoot for the moon, but don't worry if you miss. I love that. I think he might have pinched it from somewhere, but that was the first time I ever heard it, and I love it. And to now extend past my 60 seconds. Yeah, I did this. Success is also a really great chair. Like, my life goal is to find the perfect chair. And the chair represents all sorts of things to me. Are you familiar with the Happy Startup School, Lawrence and Carlos?
Yeah, I know of them. Only recently I found out about them. I need to catch up with them.
You got to get those guys on.
Yeah.
They've been going 10 years now, and I remember being at their festival. They do this festival called Summer Camp every year, and being there 5-6 years ago and going through this exercise where we had to imagine that we've achieved everything. This is the first day, we've woken up, and it's the first day of our lives where we've achieved everything. Everything on the list is done. Absolutely everything. We've built everything, we've seen everything, we've met everyone, and now you're waking up. And they just walk you through this beautiful sort of mindfulness-led exercise where it's like, okay, and what do you do? What does the morning look like? What room are you in? What are you eating for breakfast? Who are you with? Where do you go? What conversation do you have? And then, and then it sort of like, and then what's the most, and then looking back on that, draw a picture of the most significant, salient thought that appeared during this walkthrough, this exercise. And I drew a chair. And the chair is representative of the conversations that you have in the chair, right? And I want to, my feeling and sense of success, that feeling comes from having great conversations, being asked great questions, being able to exercise my best behaviours and articulate my beliefs and so on, and creating opportunities for other people to do the same and to, change your mind about things and so on. That stuff's great. I think that's why you do this. And my business partner and I, we've been thinking really hard recently about these things. And when you do the lots of hats and you move very quickly through work and your career and so on, it's very easy to kind of get obsessed with just achieving something, moving on to the next thing, achieving something, moving on to the next thing, being defined by a success or a failure and so on. And what he calls the win log, which is it's a bit of a nerdy IT joke, because that's what you would type into a command line to see some boring stuff about your computer. But a win log is also a nice list of things that you've won, and you look back on things that you've achieved and so on. And I'm really shit at it. I got an MA last year and I don't even care. What? Come on! I work hard for that. And when we've been reflecting this last year or so, we've been like, well, actually, and something that I've come across in those conversations is like, if I look back at my career, even just like the last 10 years of it, something like that, I've done enough. And a lot of people, and this, I don't want this to sound like an exercise in grandeur or whatever. Like, this is genuine. Like, this is me trying to be really, really freaking humble and going, if most people had the career that I had over a course of 4 or 5 decades, like, they'd probably feel all right. Like, they'd done all of these things, and jumped to all these places and experienced all of these sort of like, and whizzed around the world doing all this stuff. Like, that's enough. Like, that's a career done. And if that's enough for them, it's enough for me. So I'm done. I'm out. What's next? And so as I move forward into what's next, I want to make absolutely sure that it's so different from what I've already done. I want to make sure that, and this is why at the moment I'm picking up a lot of stuff and then putting it down, because it's like, no, I've done that before. Have I done a magazine before? Yes. So do I need to do another one? No. Have I run an agency before? Yes. So do I need to run another one? No. Have I built an app before? Yes. Do I need to build another one? No. And constantly challenging myself. Now's the time to do something new and different, because you've done enough. Like, you've felt every form of success that there is going almost. So what's left? And I just want to sit in a really fucking cool chair. And if Billy Big Bollocks wants to get a new Audi, I just want a new chair to experience better conversations in. And the chair is representative of the quality of conversation I can have and the environment I can create to have that conversation in. I'm going to stop there because I feel like I might just end up repeating myself. But hopefully that feels like something useful.
What a great place to be. In all honesty, like, from all of the conversations I have on here and all of the things that are, I guess, intrinsically inside me, I feel like I'm on a journey. I'm searching for something, potentially. This has answered a lot of my
chances are you've already found it.
And I think that's it. Like, listening to you talk and that description, and actually just being okay with going, it's enough. What I've achieved already is enough. Because there's a part of me personally. This becomes therapy for me, so apologies about how I go around this. But I look at that and go, I've got so much I still got to do. Still got to get to here. I've still got to get to there. I've still got to achieve X. Why have I got to do that? And actually, back to the thing what I learned a lot from the Bruno conversation, and some I've had recently as well, about gratitude and being really grateful for where you are right now, and recognising the key that you've just made is recognising what you've achieved is enough. That's okay, and that is okay. And being happy with that.
Yeah.
That's what it's about, surely, because you get into that back past all you, or whether that's tomorrow or 50 years time, but that deathbed and you go.
Well, you put being present at high risk, and I don't think that that's really worth putting at risk, because it's too good.
I'm going to read a statement from the book, actually, as we've come to the end.
Okay.
This was because just talking about being present. Now, I'm going to read this out, and it says, our purpose is simple, is to exist and be present. If we can just be present enough to be inspired by the world around us, we can create great new things.
Sounds right, doesn't it?
For me, love that. Again, all of these conversations I've had over so much time, and the key that I'm trying to do, the thing I'm working on the most in myself, is to try and be present as much as I possibly can. This helps me to do that, because I love to be engaged. But in my outside life and everything else I do around that, to try and be present. But how you articulate that in the book, and how you just describe that, for me, pure gold.
Well, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, like you've probably already got the thing that you're looking for, but maybe you just want to experience more of it. So maybe the magic trick there is to just be present enough for a moment to take stock of all of the things that you have, and then work out what needs trimming out and what needs more attention. And it's not necessarily about creating something new to pay attention to, but just looking at what you have and giving yourself permission, time and space to pay more attention to it.
Mate, honestly, what can I say? Thank you so much for your time. It's been honestly an absolute pleasure to have got to know you in a short space of time. I feel like I've known you for a very long time, which is amazing.
Always a nice feeling, isn't it?
But and honestly, when you just connect with someone and resonate, and listen, the first book I've read in 15 years, cover to cover.
There you go. That's going to have to go on the front cover of the next edition.
And it was brilliant. I enjoyed that, but more so enjoyed our conversations today. And,
Me too.
And your wisdom and insights is incredible. So thank you for sharing it, mate.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I've had a really, really, really nice time.
Been amazing. And that, as they say, is a wrap.